Governor Wallace, President Johnson made 3 recommendations to you yesterday: that you come out in support of universal suffrage, that you permit lawful demonstrations, and that you set up a biracial committee. Governor, have you decided how to answer the President's recommendations?
I'm going to discuss those recommendations on this program in full as we get into the program.
Live from the State Capitol building in Montgomery, Alabama, Face the Nation, a spontaneous and unrehearsed news interview in the office of George C. Wallace, Governor of Alabama. Governor Wallace will be questioned by CBS News correspondent Nelson Benton, Al Kettner, Southern racial reporter of United Press International, and CBS News correspondent Paul Niven.
Governor Wallace, we have more questions about your conversation with the President yesterday, about last Sunday's violence in Selma, and about the future of race relations in your state, and we'll begin in just a moment. Governor Wallace, what is your reply to President Johnson's requests?
Well, President Johnson and myself had a frank and friendly discussion about the problems that confront the people of Alabama, and I told him, as alluded to in my telegram, that I was under the impression from what I had read and heard that this was a national problem. Of course, the recommendations that he made to me was the matter of endorsement of universal suffrage. And I'd like to make my position clear. I have said 100 times or more in speeches in nearly every state in this union, and I have said it in Alabama, that any eligible citizen of this state is entitled to vote. My position is still the same today as it was when I made those speeches in other states in the union. So I am for eligible citizens of this state voting, and insofar as the Negro citizens of Alabama are concerned, there are 115,000 or more at the moment voting, and more registering each and every week. So my position has always been that eligible people are entitled to vote in this state and every state in the union. On the matter of, I believe there's something said about lending support to voter registration. I gave the Selma, Dallas County Board of Registrars an additional 10 days to register in that county, as I am authorized to do under the law upon application of that board. I gave 10 extra days to the county of Dallas, and only 26 Negroes showed up in the 10 days. So it seems that I have aided voter registration in giving additional days to registrar boards when requested. The matter of lending support to peaceful assembly, I have always stated 100 or more times in this country and other states of the Union, when asked about what do you think about the pickets that are picketing you, I said pickets have a right to picket. Peaceful picketing is part of the American system. Peaceful demonstrations are part of the American system. Freedom of speech is part of the American system, but as the President himself said, it doesn't give you the right to go into a crowded theater and holler fire. So the people of Selma, Alabama have had 8 weeks of almost continuous demonstrations, and therefore I think that when demonstrations begin to get to the point that they interfere with the rights of others, that in my judgment they cease to become peaceful. And I might point out that many peaceful demonstrations by Negro citizens of this state have been carried on throughout Alabama. There have been many in the last week, but I do think, and we have lent support to them in that we have had even policemen there to see that no one got hurt in the demonstrations. So we are for peaceful demonstrations, but we don't think that peaceful demonstrations should run 8 long weeks. I wonder how long the people of New York would put up with 8 weeks of demonstrations in Times Square, in the Boston Commons, in the city of Philadelphia, when in the demonstrations in Pennsylvania Avenue just 2 days ago, they were allowed to sit down for only 30 minutes, whereas here in the capital of Alabama, they sat down and blocked the main thoroughfare for 11 1/2 hours. So the matter of the biracial committee suggested by the President, let me say this, that there are biracial committees in every state, in every large city in the United States, biracial committees in New York, in Philadelphia, in Chicago. They are in many cities in this state, and yet we have demonstrations today continuously in other cities of the United States. So a biracial committee, in my judgment, doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a cessation of demonstrations. I want to comment also on something that was said about brutality. I have always been against brutality, and Those charges have been lodged at every police force in every large city and every state in the Union. And if we, of course, were stampeded into doing away with all policemen who have been charged with police brutality, there wouldn't be hardly enough policemen in the United States today to even have traffic control. I am against police brutality. I've always been so. And there's been only one instant in all of the weeks and months of provocation in this state that the police force of Alabama have been charged or intimated or stated by the Justice Department to have been engaged in police brutality. I do think that that's a very good exemplary record for the Alabama State Troopers.
Governor, could we go to another point? What do you feel is causing all this racial turmoil in Alabama?
Well, when you say racial turmoil in Alabama, let's talk about racial turmoil in the United States.
Well, could we talk about it in
Yes,
Selma,
sir.
Alabama,
Yes, sir.
just for a minute?
I will tell you one reason that we have racial turmoil in Selma, Alabama. It's because of the United Press International, as one of the agencies of news dissemination, misleading and telling things that are not true. Now, you represent the United Press International, and I want to read to you a typical distortion and a typical unmitigated falsehood that has inflamed people in other parts of the country at Selma. The statement was made by the UPI wire service that James Jackson, who was injured by being shot and later died in Marion, Alabama, the UPI quoted Sister Michael Ann, a Catholic nun, as administrator of the Good Samaritan Hospital, that he was refused treatment and admission there at the Perry County Hospital because he was a Negro. Sister Michael Ann said this is absolutely and untrue, that she has never made any such statement as that, and yet your news, UPI, which you represent, put out a statement that was read by millions of people that a citizen could not be treated in Perry County Hospital because he was a Negro, and this good Catholic nun, and I don't know her attitude on other matters involved in this, but she said that's simply not the truth. I think that that in itself is a good explanation of why we have turmoil in Selma. People reading the UPI saying that a Negro could not be treated at a hospital when he was injured because he was a Negro would inflame me and inflame the people of this state. So I say to you that no Negro has ever been turned away from any hospital in Alabama because he's a Negro, and if any ever is turned away that I find out about it, I will put a stop to it. That's the reason for the turmoil. Now, I will say this, that I do not say that there are many good people in Selma, many good Negroes in this state and in the country who conscientiously feel that they have a grievance. The Civil Rights Bill last year was enacted into law which really changed the American concept of government, in my opinion. We were against that law, but it passed and became the law. The people, I have never asked for disobedience of that law. I don't call for disobedience of any law. And it was stated that if you pass this Civil Rights Bill, it will get the people out of the streets and into the courts. And therefore, in my judgment, any grievance by anyone can be adjudicated in the courts of this land, in the federal courts, without any street demonstrations of any extended length.
Governor, excuse me, the next question will come from Mr. Benton, but in view of your remarks on UPI, I think Mr. Kettner should be allowed to reply if he wishes to.
Governor, I think we've raised a side issue here, frankly, but I think that we should get this cleared up. The point about Sister Michael Ann was raised at the news conference that she had at the hospital. We later were told that the hospital at Marion did admit Negroes, and I drove all the way to Marion to ascertain that that was a fact, and another story was carried saying that they have admitted Negroes for a long time.
I know, but why in the first place did you ever quote a good Catholic nun who made no such statement as that? That's typical of the distortions. And I also want to...
The statement was made, and we can go into that at some other point.
That's not a side issue, though. That's one of the reasons why we have an inflamed situation in this country, is the distortions. And I also want to go into this, the matter of police brutality. I challenge this network, the NBC network and ABC network, to run 2 hours of documentary film on the controlling, restraining, and stopping of the demonstrations and riots in Philadelphia, in Rochester, in New York, in Chicago, in Cleveland, and in Selma on the same program, and let the American people themselves look and see for themselves where more force was used, who used less restraint. And therefore, as you know, accusations of police brutality was lodged against every police officer and every police chief in every one of these cities. And so we've talked about the matter of injuries the other day at Selma. There were some people injured, and I regret that. I am just as sorry as I can be. But I hope that you can see here this about the New York. And President Johnson said American citizens have a right to protection of life and limb, whether driving along a highway in Georgia, a road in Mississippi, or a street in New York. Look at the clubs raised by the policemen hitting demonstrators in New York. I want to show you a picture here from the Philadelphia route. Look at the clubs there, and look at people on the ground being beaten. Can you see that? I hope that you will just look at that.
Governor, I'd like to pursue that point with you just a moment if I could.
I'm going to show this, though, because we've had a lot of distortion in this country. Look at the drawn pistols here in New York, where they're shooting over the heads of the demonstrators. Suppose there'd been any shots over the demonstrators the other day. They're talking about using horses. Now, I'm against violence, and I'm just as sorry that anybody got hurt. They talk about Cossacks. Look at all these Cossacks here, so-called. Look at these horsemen running down people in the city of New York. There they are. That's not Selma, Alabama. That's New York. And I have other pictures here, and I challenge this network themselves to run the film of the stopping of demonstrations in every city in this United States and let the American people judge for themselves.
Governor, you referred to Philadelphia and to New York as riots. You think that the situation that existed on this side of the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Sunday was a riot? The Negroes were standing in a line waiting and asking to have a word with your troopers, sir.
Mr. Benton, and I want to say again that my orders have always been to use a minimum amount of force. No force if necessary. For goodness sakes, don't let anybody get hurt. I've said that over and over and over. That's all.
Was the amount of force used last Sunday the minimum required?
Was it the minimum required? That matter at the present time, as a result of the charges of police brutality, is under investigation, but I'm not going to be stampeded or blackjacked, as Mr. Johnson said, into making any accusations against the police because some outside agitators themselves have accused us of police brutality. Because clubs were used on Pennsylvania Avenue the other day in clearing the street of people who lay down for 30 minutes. Now, when you say was the Selma situation the same, I want to again say that we don't want anybody to get hurt, and I'm just as remorseful about injuries to any American citizen as anyone. But these people were told that they could not march. These people had some of the same ones who threw rocks and bricks and bottles at the police in Marion. They were in that line themselves. Mr. Lingo testified in federal court that one reason that his troops, he was informed, didn't use the tear gas was because they had seen tear gas used in Oxford, Mississippi by the federal marshals. And so, according to his evidence, according to what was said, and I haven't read the evidence, but I just reported that, they attempted to push them back off of the roadway because an order had been issued by the governor of Alabama that they should not march. And the reason we issued that order was not to allow them to demonstrate, but because on a 50-mile stretch of road with embankments, having to walk on the highway part of the way, with curiosity traffic by the hundreds of automobiles, with people that might, we have an element of people in our state, the same as in New York, that are sometimes uncontrollable. We have laws against murder and rape and arson because they are committed in this state. And the state of New York has those laws too because they commit arson, rape, and murder there. We didn't want any of the demonstrators to get hurt. We were afraid if they got on the highway that it would be impossible to defend them, it would be impossible to protect them, and at night, sleeping along wooded areas, no telling what could have happened because we have had people to come in our state, black and white, who are intent on seeing that trouble does develop.
If I could move on to the present, sir, and into the future. After your meeting with the president yesterday, do you feel now that some sort of conciliatory action on your part is necessary? You've got a emotional clash in Selma that
what I want to try to point out is that these charges of brutality, these activity, the controlling of demonstrations in other parts of the country have been not unlike those here in Alabama. In fact, we've been more peaceful. One reason they have demonstrations in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia is that we tolerate them. You couldn't demonstrate 8 straight weeks in New York City in Times Square, and the thoroughfares of Selma are just as much in the interest of the people of Selma as the Times Square is to the people of New York. the World's Fair demonstration. The New Yorkers didn't let their World's Fair be stopped. All they did was use billy clubs to knock people unconscious, and I was appalled myself to see the necessity of any such force. And I do hope, after talking to the President, because I know he is vitally concerned himself, and he is vitally concerned with the matter of voting, and I want to assure the President that I am vitally concerned in the matter of voting, and we're going to do all that we can to see that eligible citizens of this state are entitled to vote, and when we find any discrimination existing in the right to vote, I will help remove it. In fact, this matter is being adjudicated in the federal courts at this very minute.
Governor, you said earlier that you'd said 100 times that all qualified voters should be permitted to register.
That's correct.
Is it not true that in 2 counties, Lowndes and Wilcox, there are no Negro registered voters?
I've been told that that's true. And that matter today is being adjudicated in the federal courts. There's a case involving those 2 counties and every county in Alabama at the present time. There is no election coming in Alabama for another year and a half. So why the rush? Why not wait and see how this vote suit comes out? And I can tell you this, that the people of Alabama will obey federal court orders. We don't like the federal court orders that have been issued. We think the federal courts have taken over this country, but we realize that they must be obeyed. We have obeyed every federal court order, and the leader of the demonstrations in Alabama, Mr. King, has said that he will not obey an unjust order. And he also said yesterday they were going to march regardless of what the federal courts say.
Governor, would you sit down with the Negro people of Alabama, their representatives from the state, and talk over these problems they say they have?
Not only would I sit down with Negro citizens of this state, I have already sat down with Negro citizens of this state. Negro citizens have come to this office like white citizens. I have talked to them about the problems in their cities. I had a delegation from a city with a Negro mayor the other day in the city council who came here.
Would you talk to a delegation from Selma?
I will talk to a delegation of any citizens of this state about any problem. I will not talk to any outside agitators. I will not talk to anybody in this state if he has a record of belonging to organizations, for instance, that are not called subversive, but I'll talk to any citizen of this state because I am the governor of all the people of Alabama.
We have many more areas to get to. I must interrupt. We'll resume in just 1 minute. Governor Wallace, you said a moment ago that it was your policy to obey court orders whether you like them or not.
That's correct.
Does that mean that if Judge Johnson this week issues an order permitting lawful, orderly demonstrations, you will tell your police to facilitate them and to protect lawful demonstrations?
I will do whatever a court order issued tells me to do. I may not like the court order, but I can tell you this, that we have always obeyed court orders, and we will obey the next court order. And we also expect other people to obey court orders.
Governor, when you stood in the doorway at the university against
That's
the
correct.
court integration order...
No, sir, I didn't disobey a federal court order. Had I disobeyed one, I would have been tried for contempt. And I also told this nation that I was going to try to raise constitutional questions in that stand. I got on television 3 times in Alabama, and I said, please stay away from the University of Alabama. Don't come there. We want no violence. My record's well known on that. We didn't have a single rock thrown or cat call on that day. It was safer there than it is in the shadow of the White House. And so I was trying to raise a constitutional question to be adjudicated in the courts, a basic question. That was the reason I was there, not to defy for defiance sake. I don't like federal court orders. I don't like what the federal courts have done to this country, and I'm going to work to try to change things that have happened in our country, which I think are not in the interest of any citizen, regardless of his race, color, creed, or national origin, but we have never disobeyed any court order. Now, the leader of the demonstrations in this state says that he is going to disobey any order, federal or state, that he considers unjust, and this makes our position difficult.
Governor, I'd like to pursue Mr. Kettner's question about your meeting with a delegation from... You said you would meet with anyone who wanted to see you as long as they're a resident of the state of Alabama. Let's suppose that Reverend Anderson from Dallas County and a group of Dallas County citizens petition you for such a meeting. Would you grant that, sir?
I have granted permissions, not permission, but interviews, appointments to any group of citizens in this state, labor, management. I will not grant any interview to any group who come here in a disorderly fashion, such as marching by the hundreds up the street. But if anyone comes in a small group to see me about any matter, I will discuss it with them.
If that particular group petitions you, will you give them an appointment?
I will see any group of Alabamians who come to me because I am the governor of all the people of this state. And I have never declined to see anybody because of their race, color, creed, religion, or national origin. I have seen Negro school children come through this office to see the governor of their state, and I've given them pictures, and I've signed autographs for them, and I'll do it again because I'm the governor of all the people of this state. But that's not the issue involved in these demonstrations. I hope someday that those in authority will investigate to the very core, and especially those in positions of leadership, and see what organizations many of them are connected with. Because in
what do you feel is involved in these demonstrations?
I would like I would refer you to J. Edgar Hoover's statement that he made at least 5 times before congressional committees about the infiltration of this so-called civil rights movement with members of the communist conspiracy. That's exactly what I'm talking about, and I challenge the people of this country to have an objective investigation. And while we are investigating, we will protect the rights and the safety of every citizen of this state, regardless of their race, color, creed, religion, or national origin.
Hasn't Mr. Hoover also said that the NAACP and the other organizations have never been taken over at a national level by the communists?
He may have said that, but he didn't say that there were no members of that organization that have pro-communist connections. And I would like to say that Mr. J. Edgar Hoover said in his Masters of Deceit that there are more members of the Communist Party today in the United States than there was in Russia when Russia was taken over by the communists.
Could you say, Governor, what you are doing specifically to ease the racial tensions in Alabama?
Yes, sir. We are having the largest educational program in Alabama's history. I'm building 8 junior colleges and trade schools today for exclusive use of the Negro race. I'm working for a free textbook program through the 12th grades. We are the only state in the South that doesn't have that, because I want black and white children both to have books to go to school, because many of them do not. I have 2 letters in my office from 2 leading Negro educators who have said that you have done more for the Negro people of this state than any governor of our times. We've had more new industry to come to our state, more new jobs for them. We don't have an unemployment problem among Negroes in our state. I am working for educational enhancement. That is the solution to these problems. We're going to stop dropouts in Alabama among members of the Negro race. We're affording them better educational opportunities, and that's the answer.
But do you feel that such things as the literacy test and voter qualification need to be eased?
Well, let me say that New York has a literacy test unless you provide an 8th grade certificate. We need a fair, reasonable literacy test, because I don't believe that illiterate should be allowed to vote, whether they are white or black.
Do you feel the one you have is fair and reasonable?
That matter is being tested in the federal courts, and if the federal courts say that it is too hard, then it will be withdrawn in compliance with the federal court.
Do you personally feel it's fair and reasonable?
I haven't seen but a few of the inserts, because the Supreme Court of Alabama. But I would like to point out that 4 of the questions asked in these questionnaires, they give the answers right above. And you don't have to pass, I think, but 7 questions to pass. You are given the answers of 4. But let's let the federal court decide that question. It's being adjudicated. I don't want to offer any evidence here, one way or another. And whatever the federal court says about it, we will abide by it.
Governor, in answer to our opening questions about your meeting of President Johnson's request, you gave us your views on the 3 subjects, but what are the mechanics of this? Are you going to get back to him with detailed answers?
Well, I have no plans yet, but I do say that there must be a cessation of these demonstrations throughout the country, or it's going to take all the federal, state, county, and local police to protect the constitutional rights of the non-demonstrators in this country, because, after all, the safety of people upon the street is threatened by continuous demonstrations day in and day out.
If the Congress passes a federal voting rights law, will you enforce it in your state?
If any law passed by the American Congress, held constitutional, will have to be enforced in this state. We may not like it, and we will do our best to see that they are repealed, as we are going to work toward the repeal of the Civil Rights Bill, a modification of it. But we will have to abide by any law passed. We don't ask for defiance and anarchy. That's exactly what the demonstration leaders are saying. We're going to march regardless of what the federal courts say or the state courts. We don't take that attitude. And I want to commend the overwhelming majority of Negro and white citizens of this state, because they have been very restrained. And I'm going to try to be a governor of all the people of this state, regardless of their color.
Governor, thank you for being our guest on Face the Nation. We'll have a concluding word in a moment.
Today on Face the Nation, George C. Wallace, governor of Alabama, was interviewed by CBS News correspondent Nelson Benton. Al Kettner, Southern racial reporter of United Press International, and CBS News correspondent Paul Niven. Next week, another prominent figure in the news will face the nation. Face the Nation was broadcast live from Montgomery, Alabama.